anything in particular you're looking at in terms of AI?
Challenge and an opportunity for us. AI can be a massive opportunity for India, and indeed in the closing chapter of our book, we've discussed how AI can be transformative in the positive sense. The reason it's potentially a curse for India is, much like automation resulted in job losses for blue-collar workers in factories,
Right.
much like factory automation resulted in job losses for blue-collar workers, I think there's a distinct possibility AI will result in job losses for white-collar workers.
Right.
If you talk to India's, for example, banks, they'll be pretty candid in telling you that AI will help them reduce their cost-income ratios by as 1/4. Is the fact that they won't need to employ as many people to say, give me a home loan or give me a car loan. AI will do that. The AI stack will be made available to the broader public. So a low-income farmer in Punjab can use Bhashini to access, to figure out what subsidies, what incentives are available to him.
When we're talking about the IT services, let's say, and the semiconductor space as well, so anything in particular you're looking at in terms of AI?
Challenge and an opportunity for us. The opportunity aspect, I'll request Nandita to explain. I think AI can be a massive opportunity for India, and indeed in the closing chapter of our book, we've discussed how AI can be transformative in the positive sense. The reason it's potentially a curse for India is, much like automation resulted in job losses for blue-collar workers in factories,
Right.
much like factory automation resulted in job losses for blue-collar workers, I think there's a distinct possibility AI will result in job losses for white-collar workers.
Right.
If you talk to India's, for example, banks, they'll be pretty candid in telling you that AI will help them reduce their cost-income ratios by as much as 1/4.
Okay.
Right? Cost-income ratios come down from say 40% to as low as 30%. Right.
Okay.
Now, implicit in that is the fact that they won't need to employ as many people to say, give me a home loan or give me a car loan. AI will do that, right? And it's very believable that indeed AI will do that, right? And similarly in the IT services industry. The IT services industry will get lots of work from the Fortune 500 companies for AI-related projects, but they are saying that to get the job done for the Fortune 500 companies, they won't need as many programmers in the future. And as you might have heard, in the last 12 months, the IT services industry has shed 1 lakh workers. This has never happened before, right?
It's always been on the highway speed.
Right. So from a profitability perspective, our India's banks and India's IT services companies will benefit from AI. But from a jobs perspective, especially for the kind of workers, the class of workers that we belong to, this looks to be a real challenge in the horizon for India. The only sort of option for people like us is upskill ourselves to do things that AI cannot do. But that's easier said than done. Now, AI can be an opportunity for India. How that is the case, I request Nandita to elaborate.
So the positive spin on AI is that with that kind of technology, the reach that it can have for a lot of people, say government agencies can reach out to a lot of people for giving out.
And the economies, given our population, is like tremendous.
Exactly. And even smaller companies can also latch onto that. So the reach that it gives you is just tremendous. So we've also mentioned in the book how these things are actually panning out. So there's a non-profit organization in Bangalore called Take Step organization, founded by Nandan Nilekani and Rohini Nilekani. So they have basically come together. It's a whole amalgamation of professionals from different industries, experts in their fields, coming together and building solutions for use cases which are specific to India. Just to highlight one, there's something called Bhashini. Bhashini is a very homegrown large language model. It's in a collaboration with
IIT Madras
and people at Eastep. So what they've done is they've created this large language model which is not dependent on data that comes from Google. So right now what these models do is they scrape data from Google or whatever sources which are there already on the internet, and then they do the translation. What they've done is they've built it ground up. The benefit that this has is because internet is predominantly English. It does not have the regional languages, the might that it might have. So what they've done is they've built it ground up. They have volunteers all across the country. They are picking up dialects. They're picking up all sorts of non-verbal, verbal connotations and everything that goes into a language, and they've built that up. Now, what this will do is it will help a lot of people. Someone sitting in Delhi, perhaps if they want to service to a person who's in Tamil Nadu,
Right.
who understands only Tamil and
Right.
only English, perhaps,
Right.
they'll be able to converse with them easily.
Yes.
So the language barrier goes away for
Right.
companies
Right.
and for everyone, basically, for the
Right.
government and the companies.
Absolutely.
So this is what they're doing. This is just one part of it. There's a lot more that we've
In fact,
actually
it has actually great relevance actually to your line of work, right? So at the moment, I presume the target audience you cater to are English speakers or English Hindi speakers,
Right.
right? Courtesy Bhashini,
Right.
someone who's a Assamese speaker
This
or
was
a
already going on when
yeah,
we were talking
Tamil
about
speaker. These things are going to be made available to the public, right? Unlike
Mhm.
the American tech model where everything is privatized and everything
Right.
is for profit.
Right.
The way India is building its AI stack, very similar
Right.
to the India stack,
Mhm.
the AI stack will be made available to the broader public. So a low-income farmer
Mhm.
in Punjab
Mhm.
can use Bhashini to access, to figure out what subsidies, what incentives are available to him, or a Mizo girl who wants to
Right.
study for CFA
Right.
can use Bhashini to figure out
Right.
how she can access your course material. Perhaps there'll be scholarships also available to
Correct.
access your course material, right? No other country has
Mhm.
used AI like this, and much
Right.
very similar to what we've done in the India stack, right?
Mhm.
No other country has built something like UPI.
Mhm.
Effectively, the revolution that India stands on the cusp of is marrying UPI with AI or marrying the India stack with AI,
Yes.
which in turn transforms, say, the opportunities available to a firm like Marcellus or
Right.
to a trainer like yourself.
Right. So there's a lot, when we're looking at certain metrics by RBI as well in terms of personal debt and consumer debt to GDP ratios, etc., rising up, and we're looking at moving towards a more consumeristic economy. So any take on that? Because we're not a developed nation like the US, let's say. So how does it work out in when we're analyzing it?
Yeah, I think there's a less worrying aspect to this, and there's a more worrying aspect. Less worrying aspect is overall debt to household income or overall debt equity for
Mhm.
households is not at a level which is particularly worrying, right?
Okay.
Overall debt to GDP, I think in India, corporate debt is at a 20-year low.
Right.
So household debt to GDP would be at 45, 47%, which is very manageable, right? Western countries are at 70, 80%. The worrying aspect of this is that there seems to be a massive surge in unsecured borrowing
Yes.
and small ticket unsecured borrowing.
Right.
Now, to give credit to the regulators, sometime in
Yes.
November last year, they intervened pretty aggressively.
And right now, the release
Right.
report and they're very vigilant.
So they've pushed back. So basically, they increased the capital requirements
Right.
for banks. They said,
Mhm.
you want to lend for unsecured small ticket, feel free, but you got to reserve, you got to
Right.
set aside far greater reserves on your
Mhm.
balance sheet, and immediately banks have throttled off, right? Now, this is a challenge. My reckoning is there is distress there.
Mhm.
But because it's a small part of banks' balance sheets, I don't think it'll become a systemic issue or a contagion issue. But
Right.
there is a problem there that
Mhm.
low-income workers have taken small ticket loans for purchases like mobile phones,
Right.
for holidays and so on.
Yes.
And in that regard, we are becoming more Western.
Yes.
Perhaps too early for our country's good. At a
Mhm.
very low level of per capita income,
Right.
we are acquiring Western habits of borrowing for discretionary consumption.
Right. So something that I want to know is when we're having this discussion around the IT space or the manufacturing space, so how do you get a read on these things? So if somebody is trying to learn macroeconomic, not macroeconomic per se, but looking at understanding investments, understanding the growth and the trends in the business and industry now. So how does one study that? I mean, how do you go about it? I know it's a very,
Yeah.
very broad question, but
So first of all, I think I would submit to the people who are watching is don't read conventional books on the economy because
Okay.
they actually have nothing to say on this.
so you're talking about the economics person.
Yeah, the conventional economics textbooks in India don't address this issue,
Yes.
right? A more useful way to attack it is read the brokerage industry's reports on large
Mhm.
manufacturing conglomerates, right? There are well-known manufacturing conglomerates.
Right.
Manufacturing is 17% of GDP,
Mhm.
and there are multiple large manufacturing conglomerates. There are plenty of free resources available
Absolutely.
online on return on capital, profitability metrics, capex by
So we need
manufacturing
more
companies.
analytics, not just the core or the crude
Right.
data, but more of
And then the classic CFA staple, read annual reports of of manufacturing companies, right?
And con calls, I always say, there's so much of
Yeah. So rather than doing the kind of standard, rattabazi of
Right.
reading three books on the economy and hoping there'll be answers there,
Right.
there won't be.
Right.
Use the CFA education, use the FRM education, use your financial education to go
Right.
to the source material on corporate profitability, the corporate narrative available through conference calls, plus the internet, YouTube will have
Yes.
plenty of interviews
Right.
by the CEOs of manufacturing concerns.
Right.
And in effect, that's given that you're in an emerging economy, you're in
Mhm.
a low income country, it's a far more effective way to teach yourself about the country and what's happening here and how you can make money here, rather than saying, I've read a textbook and somehow pretend that the textbook has taught me something about the country.
There's more of reading.
And I think what can come at the very end of it is once you have understood all of this, try to corroborate that with the data that the IMF
Okay.
publishes or the government publishes. So that should be the last step. That should not be the starting step of you trying to understand the country.
Yeah, so then the point is fair. People start with the macro data
Right.
and then they go down to the company level. I think the reverse is more
Right.
useful.
So,
Start with company level understanding, understand capex at a company level, and then look at Sarkar ka, Government of India capex
otherwise you're
data.
looking at causation from the data.
Bilkul, yeah. So otherwise you got it the wrong way around, right?
Yeah.
It's in a way starting with macro data is trying to learn how to drive by looking at the rearview mirror of a car,
Mhm. Right.
right?
Right.
I mean, you can perhaps do it, but I think it's a more efficient way to drive the car is look out of the windshield rather than looking at the rearview mirror.
Right. So one is 3 books that you would be able to write. 3 books that top your list.
So since we're discussing the economy, let's focus on the economy. I'll do 2, Nandita, if you can do the third one. I would say India After Gandhi by Ram Guha. If you want one book to understand how the country has evolved after the 2nd World War, I would say India After Gandhi. And then a second book to understand the social change aspect, right? In fact, I would say this is my all-time favorite book on India. I read it again and again. India, A Million Mutinies Now by V.S. Naipaul.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think on the social aspect again, Desperately Seeking Shahrukh by Shaina Bhattacharya. I think that
Okay.
was one of the best books
Yeah,
I've read
it's a
in
brilliant
the
book.
last 1 year, detailing of how women are, sort of traveling up the ladder of social change. They're trying to make their position heard, and obviously the struggles that come with it. So that was one book that I found was.
I think she's an IMF or a World Bank economist, right?
She is a Harvard graduate.
Right,
Shaina
but I think she
Bhattacharya.
works for the IMF or the World Bank. Right?
Oh,
Yeah,
she
so,
might
so,
be one of
so it's very interesting. This is a professional economist working for a multilateral agency,
Right.
and she's written this book, incredibly interesting book on
Okay.
how Indian women's aspirations are changing. The reason she's called it Desperately Seeking Shahrukh is Shahrukh embodies a lot of what the modern urban Indian professional sort of
Right.
aspires to, and she's a professional woman, right? So I think that troika of books will tell you more about how to read the country and how to read the changes happening
Okay.
in the country.
Okay. One advice you would give to the students.
I think read as much as you can and spend less time on social
Social
media.
media. One advice to working professionals.
I would say the same thing. I think for working professionals, even more so, right? The stresses and strains of work naturally result in reading reducing. Now, one area where I'm sympathetic to the working professionals is that your eyes get tired staring at the screen. And therefore, I find podcasts a very useful way to keep the learning going, even when my eyes have run out of steam.
Okay. A productivity hack that you use is something to do with time management that you use.
I try to use all flights and all taxi journeys with either podcasts or if it's a flight, then reading. Because I find the phone is not ringing, and you got say on a domestic flight you'll have 2 hours to yourself, and I find it incredibly useful.
Yes, yes.
Useful time to read.
It's best time to read.
The people who watch movies on flights, I get a little perplexed as to
Right.
how they find the time. I envy them
Right,
that
right,
they
right.
can actually relax on a flight by watching a movie. Some people even watch soap operas on domestic flights.
I've seen that.
So if
I
you,
pity them.
yeah,
So the
I'm not sure that I pity them. I just kind of say, how do you find that time that you got 2 hours of downtime on a domestic flight and you're not even watching a movie, you're watching a soap opera.
Right.
But anyway, such is life. So on taxi journeys, podcasts, and on flights, reading.
Okay. Anything on a day-to-day regular office that you do in terms of managing time? I want to know this for myself as well.
I mean, look,
Because I've been told you're very good with time management.
I'm not so sure that's the case. My wife will have a different opinion, but I try to maintain a reasonably regular schedule. Wake up at 5 a.m. At 6 a.m. I have a yoga teacher, 7 a.m. breakfast. By 7:30 a.m. I'm sitting at my desk, and I try to leave the office by 6 p.m. at the latest.
Okay.
So that I at least get 1 hour of downtime with the family in the evening. If I don't get that 1 hour of downtime with the family, then within 5-6 days there's an explosion at home, right? So there's a check and balance in the system. But jokes apart, maintaining a routine of basic routine where you wake up at the same time every day. Try to, given that it's a warm country, waking up at 5 a.m. is not very difficult, and then try to leave office by 6 p.m. so that you get some time to refresh yourself in the evening, so that you have some stamina for the next day.
And also, routine is more liberating. People feel that having a routine or a discipline or a calendar is actually more pressurizing, but actually it's more liberating because then you think about the work to do and not the time at what time to do something.
That's right. Yeah. So I've got a routine where I only have 2 trousers and I alternate between 2 trousers. Right. So one trouser goes for the wash, and another I wear the other one. So spend no time at all thinking about shirts, trousers. And I wear the same clothes until they wear out. And I try to wear clothes of companies where we bought the stock.
So I've got the same pants, 8 of them. Same
fantastic, brilliant.
And there's another color for which I have 4.
Right.
So I
think jokes about these sorts of things are very useful. You don't end up wasting any time on this sort of nonsense.
So just one more thing. This is something that I want to know. What do you do? I mean, how does your weekend look like? Do you work on the weekend?
Most of it is this sort of peripheral reading. So if push comes to shove, yes, I'll have to do some normal annual report reading and perhaps report writing over the weekend. But I try to use the weekend for this sort of peripheral reading, because if you don't do the peripheral reading, if you don't read books on social change, you don't read books on technology, then your awareness of the world around you gets severely constrained. Right?
Mental models
That's right. Your mental model gets severely constrained, and it's very difficult to sort of go home on a weekday evening and read India, A Million Mutinies Now. I mean, you can try it, but you're mentally just gone, right? So spending the weekend doing peripheral reading is most of the weekend, and typically my wife ensures that at least once over the weekend I do something which is non-reading related, so that
domestic chores.
There is domestic chores, but she says that otherwise she says you become a robot. So by the way, she believes I am a robot. She doesn't believe I am a human being. But jokes apart, the weekend is spent on peripheral reading. Every Sunday morning, 7 o'clock, we publish this piece that whoever wants to read it, by the way, it's free. We call it 3 longs and 3 shorts. 3 long pieces on what's happening in the world, and 3 short pieces. These are not written by us. These are other people have written it, but we kind of curate it and send it out to, there's around 50,000 people on that mailing list. So again, preparing the next week's 3 longs and 3 shorts takes up good 2-3 hours, and that makes me read around different sources of. But that peripheral piece I find very important, the peripheral vision. And Monday to Friday is the more specific company accounts, company transcripts, conference call transcripts, and so on.
Any motto or mantra that you live by?
I think the 3 things we try to do for ourselves, with 3 things we try to look for when we recruit people: ethics, intelligence, and industry. So if you think you go get those 3 things sorted out, right? Ethics, honesty, intelligence, dimag, and industry, hard work. You get this troika sorted out, I think by and large life works out. Don't try to complicate it more than that.
Any advice for investors? No stock tips, just an advice when people are planning their personal finances.
I think it's very easy to get carried away by linear narratives, right? Linear narratives around, say, AI, or linear narratives around India, linear narratives on specific sectors or parts of the country. Those are not of any great use. Linear narratives seldom work out. It's worth...
And polarized as well, I think.
Right? They'll be polarized. The stock prices will more than adequately reflect that. The world works in more richer narratives. Linear narratives are not rich. Linear narratives are simple, and they result in, I think, bubbles. The world works around richer narratives, and reading around, traveling around, talking to a bunch of people helps you build the richer narratives, and I think that leads to better investing, better decision making, both in personal and professional life.
Any particular skill or something that has worked really in your favor?
I grew up in Delhi, And when I was, I think, 5 or 6, like every other child, I used to want toys. And from a very early age, there was a lot of pushback saying, we'll buy you as many books as you want, right? Amar Chitra Katha, and then the occasional Indrajal comic. It's no longer available, but Indrajal comics used to be a thing for us who grew up in the 80s. And then as I grew older, any amount of money was available for books, but no money was available for toys or clothes. And I didn't realize it when I was a child, but once I grew up, I realized it's a very powerful habit, and I can only thank my parents for building that. This kind of willingness, desire to non-stop read and learn, to the point that it results in a slightly one-dimensional personality, but it is what it is. This willingness to sort of constantly learn and be curious about the world. It might not work for everybody, but it's worked out nicely for me. It results in this hunger to learn from anybody and any source, and then we try to translate that into books, and the forthcoming book on the Indian economy hopefully will be a useful addition for people who are keen to learn about how India is changing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you,
Ashwini. I'm sure it's going to be quite useful.
Thank you. Thank you very much.